Imagine a multi-million-dollar corporation, right? The stakes are incredibly high, the assets are vast, and the daily operating budget is just massive.
Yeah, we're talking serious money.
Right. But now imagine that the board of directors for this corporation consists of, say, a retired middle school teacher, a local barista, a freelance software engineer, and, I don't know, maybe a dentist.
That's quite the lineup.
Right. None of them have prior corporate governance experience.
Yeah.
And half of them actively dislike each other because of some dispute over a parking space like 3 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. The classic parking space feud.
Exactly. And yet they hold the keys to the entire enterprise.
Yeah, that is the reality of modern real estate. I mean, we romanticize the idea of community, but functionally, we are talking about a really complex legal entity being steered by amateurs.
And that entity is your condominium committee. I wanted to start there because today we're doing a deep dive into an ecosystem that touches millions of lives, but is, frankly, almost universally misunderstood.
It's so misunderstood.
We are going to look at a specific, highly illuminating source text today. It's the River Heaven Co-Owners Manual, specifically the layman's edition on understanding committee meeting procedures from day one.
And that focus on the layman's edition aspect is just so crucial here. Because as a condominium act, the overarching law that governs these structures is incredibly dense.
Oh yeah, it's not light reading.
No, not at all. It's written by lawyers, for lawyers. What this manual does, and what we are going to dissect for you today, is translate that dense legal framework into the actual practical mechanics of, surviving and managing a vertical village.
Think about the typical scenario if you live in one of these places. Let's just stick with the River Heaven example. Hundreds of units, right?
Right.
And behind every single door is a completely different opinion on how the building should be run.
Oh, at least one opinion per door, sometimes more.
Exactly. So you've just survived the annual general meeting. It was probably loud. It was likely chaotic. People were screaming about the landscaping budget or the color of the lobby tiles.
Always the lobby tiles.
Always. But then the dust settles. Right. A new committee is elected. The land department officially registers them. And you breathe a sigh of relief thinking, okay, great. The adults are finally in charge.
And then comes the silence.
The absolute silence. Weeks go by. There are no sweeping changes, no major announcements, just this bizarre vacuum in the hallways. And people start to ask, now what? What is actually happening behind the closed doors of the juristic person's office?
Well, nature abhors a vacuum, but let me tell you, condominium lobbies abhor a vacuum even more.
Sure.
When there is no clear communication, that silence just gets filled with rumors, assumptions, and usually a tremendous amount of unnecessary anxiety.
Right.
Residents start assuming the absolute worst. They assume the new committee is corrupt or incompetent or, breaking the law somehow.
Which brings us to the mission of this deep dive. We're going to decode the exact step-by-step procedures that a newly elected condominium committee must follow, starting literally from day one.
Day one.
We are going to separate hard legal facts from the hallway gossip, because by the time we finish, you, the listener, will know the structural mechanisms of how your building should be run, and you'll be able to spot immediately when things are actually going off the rails.
And I should add, while the context here is River Heaven, the principles are universal. These are the fundamental mechanisms of corporate governance applied to, the place where you sleep at night.
So let's start at the very beginning, the anatomy of power. Because the source material immediately highlights this massive misunderstanding that creates conflict from the literal moment the election ends.
Yeah.
It's the failure to distinguish between a co-owner general meeting and a committee meeting.
It sounds like a semantic difference to the uninitiated, sure, but legally, it's a chasm. These two meetings represent entirely different entities holding entirely different functions.
So the general meeting, that chaotic gathering we just imagined, is where all the residents, the actual co-owners, come together. And the source is very clear that this gathering is designed exclusively for major legal mandates, right?
Exactly. The general meeting is a blunt instrument. It is designed for decisions that fundamentally alter the structure of the community or its major finances.
Like what?
Like electing the committee itself, amending the building's bylaws, or approving a massive special assessment to replace all the elevators.
Right. Big stuff.
The co-owners hold the ultimate power, yes, but mobilizing hundreds of people is inherently inefficient.
Well, yeah, you can't call 500 people down to the lobby to vote on whether to fix a leaky pipe on the third floor.
You would have administrative paralysis within a week. Nothing would get done.
Yeah.
That inefficiency is precisely why the law mandates the creation of the committee and subsequently the committee meeting. Once the general meeting elects those representatives, which, by the way, the law dictates must be a group of no less than 3 and no more than 9 people, the entire function of governance shifts.
I always think of this like a democratic republic. The co-owners are the citizens. We vote in the general election to choose our representatives. And those 3 to 9 elected committee members become the parliament.
I see where you're going with the parliamentary analogy, but we need to be careful with how far we stretch it.
Okay.
Well, in a government parliament, the representatives are constantly drafting new laws. A condominium committee isn't drafting new laws.
Oh, wait.
They are executing the administration of an existing asset based on the boundaries already set by the co-owners. So they're more akin to a board of directors overseeing a CEO.
Okay, and in this case, the CEO is the juristic person manager.
Exactly.
But the shift in power remains the same. Right, because I hear the frustration from residents all the time. The election finishes, and immediately someone is complaining, why wasn't I invited to the meeting where the committee picked the new security company?
Right.
Or when do we all vote on who gets to be the chairman? If the committee has this power, why is there this pervasive expectation that the whole building needs to be involved in every single administrative step?
Honestly, because letting go of direct control over your primary financial asset feels really unnatural.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you own a piece of a multi-million-dollar building, you feel a sense of absolute ownership over the whole structure, but the legal boundary is strict. The co-owners delegate their power to the committee so the building can actually function.
Right.
If the law required all co-owners to vote on every administrative detail, the elevators would literally rust while waiting for a quorum of 300 people to approve a maintenance contract.
It's a necessary delegation of authority. The citizens hand over the keys to the board.
Exactly.
So we've established who has the power. The committee of 3 to 9 people is in charge. But that brings us back to that ominous silence in the hallway. We have to examine when they are legally required to start using that power.
Yes.
And the manual points out that this specific phase is a breeding ground for some of the biggest myths in condo living.
The timeline illusions. This is where a little bit of legal knowledge becomes incredibly dangerous in the hands of the rumor mill.
Okay, the source identifies 2 major myths here. Let's tackle the 30-day rule first. Because I've been in buildings where 3 weeks pass after an election, the committee hasn't met, and suddenly there's a flyer in the elevator claiming, if the committee doesn't meet by day 30, they are operating illegally.
Yeah, and that flyer is a perfect example of conflating 2 completely different legal obligations.
Really? So the 30-day rule isn't about the meeting?
No, not at all. The Condominium Act does contain a 30-day window, yes, but it has absolutely nothing to do with when the committee must hold its first sitting.
So what does the 30 days actually refer to?
It applies to the juristic person manager. The law states that the manager must take the resolution of the general meeting, the official document listing the names of the newly elected committee members, and register that document at the land department within 30 days of the election.
Oh, so it's purely a paperwork deadline. It's just a clerical task for the manager to update the government's records.
Purely administrative. There is not a single line of legal text in the act that says the newly registered committee must convene within a month of the election.
Wow. The danger there is obvious. You could have a faction of angry residents trying to invalidate a perfectly legal committee, potentially dragging the whole building into a massive internal crisis or even litigation.
Yes.
All entirely based on a misunderstood clerical deadline.
It happens way more often than you'd think. The nuance is just lost in the lobby gossip. But the manual also highlights another heavily weaponized myth. The 7-day rule.
Okay, how does the 7-day rule get twisted?
Well, the actual law states that if at least 2 committee members formally request a meeting, the chairman is legally obligated to set a date for that meeting within 7 days.
That seems pretty straightforward. Yeah. It's a mechanism for the members to force a sluggish leadership to convene, right?
It is, but again, the lobby telephone game warps it completely. Residents hear the phrase 7 days from some legal document, and suddenly the rumor is the law says the new committee must meet within 7 days of being registered by the land department.
Which would imply a ticking clock the moment the paperwork is filed, which you're saying simply doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist at all. The 7-day rule only applies as a specific reactive response to a formal request by 2 or more members. It is not a universal starting gun for the committee's first meeting.
Okay, let me push back on this on behalf of a frustrated resident listening right now. If there is no 30-day deadline for the first meeting, and the 7-day rule only applies if members actively trigger it, what stops a newly elected committee from just sitting on their hands for 4 months? If there's no strict legal mandate saying you must start governing by X date, aren't the co-owners just at their mercy?
You're touching on a genuine vulnerability in the system there, but the law isn't entirely silent. The overarching requirement is that the committee must meet at least once every 6 months.
6 months. That's an eternity in building management. I mean, a pipe could burst in month 2, and the committee hasn't even had coffee together.
True. But practically speaking, the person who hits the start button is the chairman. They are empowered to call the meetings. If the de facto leadership is stagnating, if the chairman refuses to call a meeting to address that burst pipe, that is exactly where the 7-day rule acts as the built-in failsafe.
Ah, so the power is distributed.
Exactly.
The co-owners are protected not by a calendar deadline, but by the fact that any 2 members of that committee can look at the stagnation and say, enough, we need to meet, thereby forcing the chairman's hand.
The committee is designed to regulate itself. The law assumes that out of 3 to 9 elected individuals, at least 2 of them will care enough to force the issue if things are falling apart.
All right, so let's say the failsafe works, or the leadership is just proactive. The meeting is called, the notepads are out, everyone is sitting around the boardroom table. We've arrived at day 1.
The big day.
But wait, we just established that the chairman is the one who calls the meeting. But if this is the very first gathering of a newly elected body, they haven't elected a chairman yet.
Right.
How does a meeting legally begin without someone in charge?
You've identified the classic condominium chicken and egg paradox.
Seriously. A meeting requires a chairman to run the agenda, but the chairman can only be granted that authority by a vote on the agenda. It feels like a bureaucratic loop that would just cause the whole system to crash.
It would if the law didn't anticipate it, but it does. Under Section 374 of the Condominium Act, it explicitly outlines how this bootstrap process works. First, the law mandates that the committee elects the chairman from among themselves.
Okay, wait. Just to clarify, they cannot just pull a highly qualified resident from the building who wasn't elected to the committee and make them the chairman.
Absolutely not. The chairman must be one of the verified elected members sitting at that table. The law also allows them to elect a vice chairman, though that role is entirely optional. But to solve your paradox of how to start the meeting to hold that vote, the law provides for a temporary chair.
Okay, explain the mechanics of a temporary chair. How does that work?
If there is no official chairman yet, the members present in the room hold an immediate informal vote, simply to choose one of themselves to act as the chair just for that specific meeting.
Oh. It's like using jumper cables on a car. You need the car's alternator to generate electricity,
Right.
but you need electricity to start the engine to run the alternator in the first place.
Yes.
So you bring in an external spark to the temporary chair. Their only job is to get the engine turning over. The second the official chairman is elected, you pull the cables away and the alternator takes over.
That analogy works perfectly, provided you remember that the jumper cables have to be removed immediately. The temporary chair's sole mandate is to open the meeting, maintain basic order, and facilitate the official agenda item, electing the actual chairman.
Right.
They have no lingering authority once that vote is tallied.
So the engine is turning over. What does that first agenda actually look like? Because the source material outlines a very rigorous playbook for day 1. And the very first item really surprised me. It wasn't about budgets or fixing the roof.
No, it wasn't. The absolute first item before a single substantive issue is discussed is verification.
Checking IDs at the door. Why is this so hypercritical on day 1? I mean, presumably everyone sitting at the table knows they just ran a campaign and won the election, right?
Well, that assumes the election went flawlessly and the land department accepted everything without a single question. And in condo politics, that is a very dangerous assumption.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. Often a general meeting will vote for, say, 9 people. But when the manager takes those names to the land department, the registrar might flag one of them. Perhaps Unit 402 is 3 months behind on their common area fees, which legally disqualifies them from serving on the committee.
Wait, so the general meeting voted them in, but the government rejected the registration?
Precisely. Now imagine if the committee skips the verification step and proceeds to vote on a massive $1 million contract to repaint the entire building. And that disqualified person casts the deciding vote.
Oh, wow. The entire contract is legally invalid.
The whole process is tainted, the juristic person could be sued, the contract could be voided, and the building is plunged into utter chaos. Verification ensures the structural integrity of every decision that follows. They must cross-reference the people in the room with the official land department registry.
Okay, so they look at the paperwork, they confirm the 5 or 7 or 9 people in the room are the legally registered members. What's next on the playbook?
Once verified, they use the temporary chair to execute the next item, electing the official chairman from among themselves and, optionally, a vice chairman.
And once the official chairman takes the seat, what is their first act of business?
According to the best practices laid out in the River Heaven Manual, the next step is formally acknowledging the duties and boundaries between the committee and the juristic person manager.
Setting the rules of engagement, basically.
It's vital. A massive source of friction in condominiums is a lack of clarity regarding authority. The committee needs to establish explicitly which decisions require a formal committee vote, which decisions can the manager handle independently as part of daily operations.
Like, does the manager need committee approval to spend 5,000 baht on light bulbs?
Exactly. What about 50,000 baht on a new water pump? Defining these thresholds on day one prevents endless micromanagement and power struggles down the road.
Makes total sense.
Oh.
And the final piece of the day one playbook seems to be setting up the actual working systems.
Establishing the administrative infrastructure, yes. How will the committee communicate? Are they using a dedicated messaging group? Where will official documents be stored? How many days in advance will meeting invitations be sent?
Building this structure immediately elevates the committee from just a group of neighbors chatting informally to a professional governing body.
Exactly.
So the engine is running, the systems are in place, the boundaries are drawn, the chairman has the gavel. But this opens up a fascinating and highly contentious section of the manual. We need to examine the actual mechanics of decision-making. Specifically, how much power does that chairman actually hold?
The reality of decision-making power in a condominium committee almost always conflicts with the assumptions of the residents.
Oh, for sure.
Let's start with the foundational concept, the quorum.
We hear quorum all the time in corporate settings. But the math and the strictness of it in a condo setting basically dictates everything.
It does. A quorum is the minimum number of members legally required to be present to validate a meeting. Under the Condominium Act, a valid meeting requires at least half of the total committee members.
So it's a strict mathematical floor. If you have a 5-member committee, you need 3. If you have 7, you need 4. If you elect the maximum 9 members, you need 5.
And it is a hard, unforgiving legal line. If you have a 7-member committee and a massive emergency meeting is called regarding a huge security breach, but only 3 members show up, they can sit in the boardroom, they can discuss the issue at length, they can drink all the coffee they want.
But they can't do anything.
They cannot make a single legally binding decision. They cannot authorize a single bat of expenditure.
It's designed to prevent a tiny minority of the committee from hijacking the building's governance while everyone else is at work. But here is where the source material introduces a massive point of friction. It specifically addresses who is allowed to be part of that decision-making process, calling out the juristic person manager.
Yes. The role of the manager in committee meetings is fundamentally misunderstood by almost everyone involved, and honestly, sometimes even by the managers themselves.
The manual states unequivocally, the manager is an executive, not a committee member. They do not get a vote.
Correct.
I want to debate this for a second, because from a purely practical standpoint, it seems kind of counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, usually the manager isn't just a guy off the street. They are a trained professional, often representing a massive multinational property management firm. They possess deep expertise in building maintenance, accounting standards, and legal compliance.
Yes, they do.
They know infinitely more about running a high-rise than the retired teacher or the barista on the committee. So why would you legally bar the most knowledgeable person in the room from having a say in the vote?
I get the logic, but you are conflating expertise with a fiduciary mandate.
Okay, unpack that.
The structure of accountability demands this separation. The committee represents the financial interests of the co-owners who elected them. They are the brain of the juristic person. They set the policy.
Right.
The manager is the hands. They are a hired contractor whose job is to execute the policy.
But shouldn't the brain listen to the most educated voice?
Listening and advising are entirely different from voting. The manager is absolutely expected to advise the committee. They should present data, offer professional recommendations, and warn against bad decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But allowing a hired vendor to vote on how the co-owner's money is spent introduces a catastrophic conflict of interest.
Okay, give me a scenario where that goes wrong.
Imagine the management company's annual contract is up for renewal. The committee is debating whether to keep them or hire a competitor. If the manager had a vote, they would literally be voting on their own multi-million-baht contract.
Oh, wow.
Or consider a scenario where the manager wants to hire a specific overpriced contractor for landscaping because of a pre-existing business relationship. If they have voting power, they can strong-arm the co-owners' funds.
Right.
The democratic protection of the owners relies entirely on the fact that the manager cannot cast a ballot.
That makes the separation crystal clear. The brain decides, the hands execute, so the manager doesn't vote. That leaves the voting power entirely with the committee. What are the mechanics of that vote?
The rule is the bedrock of democracy. One member equals one vote.
Even the chairman.
Especially the chairman. And this is where we have to dismantle what I call the dictator-chairman myth.
Oh, this is rampant. People treat the chairman like they are the CEO, the supreme commander of the building. Residents will complain, the chairman decided to raise the parking fees, as if it was a unilateral decree.
Exactly. It's a psychological fallacy based on corporate titles. People assume chairman comes with inherent executive veto power or extra weight to their vote. Under the Condominium Act, it absolutely does not.
So what are they? Legal?
Legally, the chairman is a facilitator. They manage the flow of the meeting and guide the agenda. But when a motion is on the table, say, approving that new security company, the chairman's vote carries the exact same weight as the quietest, newest member of the committee.
So if there are 5 members in the room, and the chairman strongly wants Company A, but the other 4 members vote for Company B.
The chairman loses, and the juristic person hires Company B. The system demands horizontal consensus, not vertical dictation.
But what about a gridlock? Say there are 6 members present, 3 vote for Company A, 3 vote for Company B. What happens then? Does the motion just die?
This is the single situational exception in the law. Under Section 376 of the Act, if and only if a standard vote ends in a dead heat, the chairman is granted an additional tie-breaking vote.
So they essentially get to reach into a box, pull out a second ballot, and break the gridlock.
Correct. But the crucial context here is that this is a situational power designed purely to prevent administrative paralysis. It is not an inherent overarching authority.
Right.
If the initial vote is 4-2 against the chairman cannot invoke any special power. They are bound by the majority.
This is a huge realization for anyone terrified of a power-hungry neighbor taking over their condo. The law is literally engineered to prevent a dictatorship.
It is.
So the committee has debated, they've ensured a quorum, the manager advised but didn't vote, and the motion passed fairly. But how do you prove it? 6 months down the line, when a resident starts screaming that the new security company is a scam, how do you prove the process was legal?
Yes.
This leads us to one of the most explosive issues in modern community living.
The record. How the truth of the meeting is captured and stored.
Minutes, microphones, and the massive collision with privacy laws.
Yeah.
In the era where everyone has a 4K camera in their pocket, this has become a phenomenal flashpoint.
Absolutely. The source material draws a very hard, very necessary line, distinguishing between 2 concepts, meeting minutes and media recordings. They are treated entirely differently under the law.
Okay, let's define them. Meeting minutes are the traditional written reports.
Yes. The minutes document the structural legality of the meeting. They record the date, who attended, who was absent, confirmation that a quorum was met, a summary of the discussion, the specific motions proposed, and the exact tally of the vote.
So they're the official document.
Once signed, they become the official legal instrument of record.
Okay, and media recordings, on the other hand, are exactly what they sound like. The raw audio or video files captured by a smartphone, a tablet, or a tripod in the corner of the room.
And here is the stark reality that the manual highlights, which often infuriates residents. The Condominium Act does not mandate audio or video recordings of committee meetings.
I want to read a specific phrasing from the source because it perfectly encapsulates the conflict. It says, no video doesn't mean illegal, and having video doesn't make it legal.
That is the absolute crux of the issue. We live in a highly visual, highly suspicious culture. Residents operate under the assumption that if something isn't live streamed on the community Facebook page, it must be corrupt. You will see co-owners literally arguing that a committee decision to fix the roof is legally void simply because there is no video evidence of the vote.
But the courts don't care about the video.
The courts care about the written, verified, and signed minutes. A video is just a piece of supplemental media. Consider the reverse scenario.
Okay.
You could have a professionally lit, multi-camera broadcast of a committee meeting, but if the meeting lacked a legal quorum, or if they allowed the manager to cast a vote, that meeting is entirely illegal.
Even on camera.
The 4K video is nothing more than a high-definition recording of an illegal act. It doesn't magically validate a flawed process.
A high-definition recording of an illegal act. That perfectly illustrates the misplaced priority. But I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
If a committee member wants to pull out their phone to record the meeting, or if a resident demands it, why resist? Doesn't fighting the camera just make the committee look guilty? Why wouldn't a transparent board just say, sure, hit record?
Because introducing a camera fundamentally alters the psychological dynamics of a boardroom, and it directly intersects with the PDPA, the Personal Data Protection Act.
The privacy laws. How does that apply to a condo meeting?
A committee meeting requires candid discussion. Members are debating financial expenditures, analyzing the vendor contracts, and sometimes discussing sensitive issues regarding specific units like unpaid common fees or legal disputes.
Yeah, that's true.
When a camera is rolling, the environment changes from a working session to a performance.
Oh, people definitely treat condo meetings like reality TV.
It's the perfect analogy. You get two types of adverse reactions. First, the grandstanders. Certain members will stop trying to solve the problem and start performing for the camera, trying to deliver dramatic sound bites so they look like the hero on the community group chat.
I am the only one fighting against these outrageous maintenance fees.
Exactly. It completely derails the functional agenda. And the second reaction is the chilling effect. Members who are naturally reserved or who are afraid of being bullied online by angry residents will simply stay silent.
Oh, I see.
They might have a brilliant insight into why a vendor contract is flawed, but they won't voice it because they don't want to be the villain in a viral video clip circulating among 500 neighbors.
So the camera can actually destroy the horizontal democracy by silencing the majority and amplifying the loudest performer.
It creates a toxic environment. And from a strict legal standpoint regarding the PDPA, if a single committee member explicitly invokes their right to privacy and forbids being recorded, the recording must stop.
Wow.
And the crucial point is this. The member who wanted to record cannot then claim the meeting is invalid just because the camera was turned off.
So what is the pragmatic solution? Because if half the committee wants to record to prove transparency and the other half refuses based on privacy, the actual business of the building just grinds to a halt while they fight over a smartphone.
The manual offers a very clear procedural solution for this. Do not fight about it in the heat of the moment. The committee needs to establish a formal rule on day one regarding recordings.
Add it to the working systems we discussed earlier.
Precisely. The committee sits down and formally votes on a data protection policy. Are we recording? If yes, what is the specific purpose? Is it solely an audio recording for the secretary to use to ensure the written minutes are accurate, after which the audio is deleted?
Or is it a video that will be archived?
Exactly. Where is the file stored? Who has the authority to access it?
By formalizing it, you strip away the emotional drama. If someone pulls out a phone, it's no longer Bob is being shady by telling you to stop. It becomes Bob is enforcing the data retention policy we all legally adopted.
You manage the boardroom like a professional entity, not a chaotic town hall. You protect the integrity of the written minutes, which is what actually carries legal weight, and you maintain focus on governance over performance.
Okay, so the rules are established, the minutes are pristine, the camera's regulated, the quorum is met, the machine is humming along smoothly.
In theory.
In theory. But eventually, even the best-oiled machine hits a crisis. The source material highlights two specific structural crises that can paralyze a building: a missing manager and expired terms.
Continuity and crisis management. This is where the true resilience of the legal framework is tested.
Let's look at the manager crisis first. We established they are the executive hands of the juristic person. They pay the bills, manage the staff, and oversee daily operations.
Right.
What happens if the manager just vanishes? Say they suffer a severe medical emergency, or the management company suddenly breaches contract and pulls their staff out overnight. The elevators still draw electricity. The security guards still expect their salaries on Friday.
The sudden absence of the juristic person manager is one of the most critical vulnerabilities a condominium can face. A building cannot legally function without an authorized executive to sign checks and represent the entity.
Right, the hands are gone.
Exactly. The Condominium Act anticipates this exact nightmare scenario under Section 38.
What is the mechanism in Section 38?
It states that if the manager is absent or incapacitated for a period exceeding 7 days, the committee has the legal authority to appoint an acting manager.
So they just quickly interview a new candidate or hire a temp agency.
No, and this is where buildings constantly make a dangerous, illegal mistake. The law does not allow them to just hire a temporary outsider. Section 38 explicitly dictates that the committee must appoint one of the committee members as the acting manager.
Wait, one of the elected residents, the retired teacher or the software engineer, suddenly has to become the legal CEO of the building.
Yes, and we need to deeply analyze the danger of how the phrase acting manager is casually thrown around in condo lobbies.
What do you mean?
You will often hear committees say, oh, the manager is out with COVID this week, so we told the head security guard or the head technician to be the acting manager.
Which sounds like a logical delegation of daily tasks.
It is logical for tasks, but it is legally disastrous for authority. True legal authority, the power to authorize a bank transfer, to sign a legally binding vendor contract, or to represent the building in a police matter cannot be casually handed to a staff member. It requires a formal, minuted committee resolution, and the individual assuming that immense legal liability must be a committee member.
So if the manager vanishes for over a week, the committee has to convene an emergency meeting, look around the boardroom table, and basically say, okay, which one of us is going to assume the legal liability of running this multi-million-dollar corporation until we can source, interview, and hire a new professional firm?
Exactly. It is a severe emergency measure. Its sole purpose is to ensure that the vital life support systems of the building, electricity, water, payroll, insurance, do not collapse during the vacuum.
That reframes the entire concept of volunteering for the committee. You shouldn't run just for the prestige of the title. You need to be prepared for the reality that you might actually have to run the building in a crisis.
It is a profound fiduciary duty.
That addresses a sudden crisis. But what about a slow, inevitable one? What happens when a committee's term is simply up? The law dictates a set term, usually 2 years.
Yes.
When that clock runs out, do they just pack up their briefcases and walk away?
This is an area where common sense completely clashes with legal necessity. When a committee's term expires, they absolutely do not drop their tools.
But if their term is over, aren't they technically just regular residents again? By what right do they keep governing?
If they were to instantly relinquish their authority the second their term expired, and the new election hadn't happened yet, or the land department hadn't processed the new registration, the juristic person would plummet into a legal void.
Right. No one to pay the bills.
There would be no authority to pay the water bill. To prevent this catastrophic paralysis, the law dictates that an expired committee continues to serve. They maintain their full authority until the new committee officially takes over.
They become a caretaker government.
Exactly. A caretaker board. Their mandate is artificially extended purely to ensure the continuity of operations.
But consider the alternative scenario. I can hear the conspiracy theories forming right now.
I'm sure you can.
If a committee's term is legally over, but the law lets them stay in power until a new election, isn't that an incredible loophole? Couldn't a corrupt, power-hungry committee just intentionally delay calling the annual general meeting indefinitely? They could just sit there forever as an untouchable caretaker board, signing checks and awarding contracts.
It is a highly valid fear, and you've identified the inherent risk in prioritizing administrative continuity over strict term limits. However, the legal framework contains countermeasures to balance this risk.
Okay, what are they?
First, there are statutory term limits. A committee member can generally serve a maximum of 2 consecutive terms. The only exception is if it is demonstrably proven that absolutely no one else in a building of hundreds of units is willing to run.
So there is a theoretical ceiling to their tenure.
Yes, but the ultimate fail-safe, and this is crucial, never leaves the hands of the co-owners.
The residents.
Right. If a caretaker committee is suspiciously delaying the annual general meeting to cling to power, the co-owners have the legal right to bypass them. By gathering a petition representing a specific percentage of the building's total ownership, the residents can force the scheduling of an extraordinary general meeting.
The citizens can override the parliament to force an election.
Precisely. The law recognizes that a total operational vacuum is a more immediate, catastrophic threat than a briefly extended tenure. But it arms the co-owners with the democratic tools to step in if that extension morphs into an abuse of power.
Which perfectly highlights why checking out after the election is so dangerous. You can't just sigh in relief, retreat to your unit, and ignore the governance for 2 years. You have to understand how this machinery works so you can audit the people running it.
Active citizenship is a requirement, not an option, in condominium living.
That brings us to the final and frankly the most actionable section of the River Heaven Manual. We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing the Condominium Act. But the source text introduces a vital concept for anyone trying to actually audit their committee's actions. It's called the double layer of rules, the 2 layers of governance. Understanding this is essential for practical application because the Act alone does not tell the whole story of your building.
Break down these 2 layers for us.
Layer 1 is the overarching federal law, the Condominium Act. This applies universally to every single condominium in the country. It establishes the rigid, non-negotiable boundaries, the requirement for a committee, the mathematical formula for a quorum, the one-person, one-vote mechanic.
It's the broad strokes of the canvas.
Layer 2 consists of the specific bylaws of your juristic person. In our scenario, the River Heaven bylaws. Think of this as the local constitution.
Okay, so it gets into the specifics. Exactly. It dictates the granular rules tailored to your specific community. It defines the exact penalty percentage for late common fees, the operating hours of the fitness center, or crucially, the specific number of committee members required within that legal 3 to 9 range.
So if I suspect my committee is doing something wrong, I can't just wave the Condominium Act in their face. And I can't just cite the River Heaven bylaws. I have to analyze both simultaneously.
You must cross-reference them. And the cardinal rule of this dual-layer system is precedence. If the local River Heaven bylaws ever conflict with the Condominium Act, the Act universally wins.
Oh, really?
Yes. A juristic person cannot write a local bylaw that violates federal law.
Give me a practical example of a conflict like that.
Imagine a general meeting gets frustrated with bureaucracy and votes to amend the River Heaven bylaws to state, from now on, we will only elect a 2-person committee to make things faster. They vote on it, it passes with a 90% majority.
Sounds democratic.
It doesn't matter. The Condominium Act mandates a minimum of 3 members.
Yeah.
The federal act overrides the local vote. The bylaw is invalid.
Wow. So, utilizing this double-layer framework, the source material synthesizes everything we've discussed into a highly practical 8-step checklist. This is the ultimate auditing tool for a co-owner to analyze their committee's meeting minutes and determine if a decision was actually legal. Let's explore how a resident would use this in the real world.
This checklist is the framework for empowerment. The first thing a resident should do when they receive the meeting minutes is look at step 1. Verify member identities. Are the names listed as voting on a motion the exact names registered with the land department?
If Uncle Bob is listed as voting, but Uncle Bob's wife is the actual registered member, the vote is tainted.
Exactly. Step 2 is checking the quorum. You look at the total number of members in your bylaws, and you look at the attendance list in the minutes. Did at least half of the total committee attend?
And if they didn't?
If your building has 7 members and only 3 are listed as present, you don't even need to read the rest of the document. Every decision made at that meeting is legally void.
Step 3 requires checking the chairman's election. The auditor needs to confirm that the person wielding the gavel was actually elected from within the verified committee. It wasn't the manager stepping out of bounds or a loud former chairman trying to retain control.
Right. And step 4 is checking for a vice chair. As we noted, it's optional, but understanding the hierarchy is crucial for step 5, which is verifying who actually chaired the meeting if the official chairman was absent.
Right. If the chairman was sick, did the vice chair take over? Or did they properly execute the temporary chair vote just to run that specific meeting?
Exactly. If they just let the manager run the meeting, the process is broken.
Step 6 is perhaps the most nuanced for an auditor. Verify that the agenda items discussed were actually within the committee's legal power.
Yes.
How does an auditor determine what is outside their power?
You have to separate maintenance from alteration. A committee has the inherent legal authority to hire a company to repair a leaking roof, because that is maintaining the existing asset. They do not have the authority to decide, we don't use the swimming pool much, let's fill it with concrete and turn it into 20 new parking spaces.
Because that fundamentally alters the common property.
Precisely. A fundamental alteration of the juristic person's assets requires a supermajority vote from all co-owners at a general meeting. If you see a committee voting to sell common area land or fundamentally change a facility, they have vastly exceeded their legal mandate.
Wow. Step 7 is confirming the voting mechanics. Looking at the minutes, was it strictly one person, one vote? Was a motion passed because the manager improperly cast a ballot? Did the chairman try to veto a majority vote?
And finally, step 8. Check that the written minutes were properly recorded, signed, and stored, reflecting all these legal realities, rather than relying on someone's smartphone video as proof of action.
What I find so powerful about this 8-step framework is how it radically shifts the perspective of the resident.
It really does.
When people get furious about condo politics, 99% of the time, they're focused entirely on the drama of who won a vote or the substance of the decision. I can't believe they voted to paint the lobby blue. I absolutely hate blue.
Right, that's all emotion.
But this checklist forces you to ignore the color blue and look exclusively at the integrity of how the vote was held.
Because arguing about aesthetics or preference is a subjective waste of time. You will never win that argument. But if you apply this checklist and prove that a flawed process was used, that they lacked a quorum, or an unverified person cast a vote, the decision to paint the lobby blue is invalidated before the first drop of paint is ever purchased.
The process is the ultimate protection.
It is the core philosophy of the manual. Legality in a condominium is not determined by who yells the loudest in the lobby. It isn't determined by who has the most aggressive faction on the line group or who shot the most dramatic 4K video of the meeting.
So what is it?
Legality is a cold structural equation. Proper authority plus verified people plus correct quorum plus rigid procedures equals a valid, legally binding decision.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with the absolute anxiety of day one, the deafening silence in the hallway after an election.
Yes.
And we have systematically unpacked the machinery of how power is delegated. We've dismantled the myths of the 30-day and 7-day rules.
The timeline illusions.
Right. We've explored the chicken and egg paradox of electing a chairman, the strict mathematics of a quorum, and why the most experienced person in the room, the manager, is legally barred from voting.
Essential boundaries.
We navigated the explosive debate over video recordings versus written minutes, and we looked at the terrifying realities of a missing manager and a caretaker board.
We have replaced lobby hearsay with structural legal reality.
And the value of this understanding just cannot be overstated. By internalizing these mechanisms, you are now essentially immune to the panic-inducing gossip that plagues every complex.
Absolutely.
When someone tries to tell you the committee is illegal because they didn't meet in exactly a week, or when a chairman acts like a dictator, you know the actual rules of the game. You have the auditing tools to hold them accountable. You are no longer just a resident. You are an empowered co-owner.
Knowledge is only valuable when it is applied. The structural integrity of your home depends on residents actually utilizing these tools.
But as we wrap up this deep dive into the River Heaven Manual, I want to step outside the text for a moment. I want to leave you with a final provocative thought that builds directly upon everything we've analyzed regarding power, term limits, and the absolute necessity of continuity.
Right.
We put so much effort, so much brilliant legal brain power into designing these watertight rules. We build massive administrative fortresses out of quorums, verification checks, and voting limits. We do all of this to prevent a few bad actors from seizing control of a condominium and financially ruining the community.
We engineer defenses against internal tyranny.
Exactly. We prepare for the dictator. But consider the long timeline of a building. What happens 10, 15, or 20 years from now? The building ages. The initial excitement of moving into a brand new complex fades away. People get busy, people move out, and units turn into rentals.
That's the life cycle of real estate, yeah.
What happens when the real enemy is no longer corruption but apathy? Think about those strict term limits we discussed. You can only serve a maximum of 2 terms. What happens when that term limit arrives? The caretaker board is completely exhausted and desperate to step down, and literally no one in a building of 500 units is willing to step up to be on the committee.
That is a chilling thought.
As you walk through your lobby tomorrow, look at the boardroom doors. Look at the people waiting for the elevator with you. And consider this. We spend all our time fearing a hostile takeover. But is the ultimate existential threat to your property's value really a power-hungry dictator chairman? Or is it a completely empty boardroom? Because when the general meeting ends and the silence falls, someone still has to sit in that chair.